Guys, let's talk about spinal shock because you people are facing some problems regarding spinal shock, but this is not so this is not so complicated. So don't make it complicated because they will not ask you much question from spinal shock. They will just ask you which reflex goes first, which reflex comes first, these things. I will just give you an overview about spinal shock. See, we have included the definition. Remember, it's a temporary loss. Okay, it's a temporary loss. Now it has phases. It has four phases. Now in first phase we lose the reflexes, and this is the characteristic finding of spinal shock. Characteristic finding of spinal shock is losing the reflexes. Now how do we lose the reflexes? See, it's a they say it's a caudorostral pattern, like first reflex to go, first reflex to go. Previously it was believed that bulbocavernous reflex is the first one to go. Okay. Recent studies, very recent studies have shown that delayed plantar reflex is the first one to go. So this will be the serial. This will be the serial. Loss of reflex. Loss of reflex serial will be this one. Delayed plantar reflex, that is DPR, then bulbocavernous reflex, then knee jerk or patellar reflex, then ankle jerk or Achilles reflex. Achilles reflex. Okay, then finally, normal plantar reflex. Now, what is the difference between delayed plantar reflex and normal plantar reflex? See, guys, delayed plantar reflex will come after long, the plantar reflex will be delayed. Mild flexion, then extension. Mild flexion, then extension. We have a picture. Don't worry about it. Then phase 2 is returning the reflexes. In phase 2, the reflexes return. They ask this question. See, from loss of reflex, they will ask you, how do you know that spinal shock is completed? Spinal shock is completed. That means spinal shock is, this person is fully in spinal shock. That is plantar reflex. They only mention plantar reflex. When plantar reflex is gone, that's the final one to go. Final one to go. Then phase 2, reflex starts returning. Now, it is very controversial which reflex comes first. Like still some articles say bulbocavernous reflex comes first. But recent studies says deep plantar reflex comes first. So if you get this question and you have both in option, go for delayed plantar reflex. That will be the best answer. First reflex to return. First reflex to return. If this is not in option, then choose bulbocavernous reflex. If both of them are not in option, select the next one, patellar reflex. Very simple. That means you have to choose the best option from given choices. That means which one comes first from the following. So if they start with patellar reflex, then gives Achilles reflex, then gives plantar reflex, then gives other reflexes, some other reflexes. So patellar reflex will be the best choice. The one comes first in serial. The one comes first. The one comes first in this serial will be the best answer. Best answer. Remember this chart. Just remember this chart, and other things you can just give a reading, not so important. Only the portion I told you, that one is important. Now about bulbocavernous reflex. What is the bulbocavernous reflex? Bulbocavernous reflex, here we have bulbocavernosus muscle, here we have bulbocavernosus muscle. Now when we pull through glans penis or we pull gently the catheter, anal sphincter will contract. This is bulbocavernous reflex. Bulbocavernous reflex. Very simple. Now, then we have included some other things too. Now, what is a delayed plantar reflex? And some people might get confused about delayed plantar and Babinski. So don't worry about it. See, delayed plantar reflex requires a very strong stimulation. Very strong stimulation. Very strong stimulation. It needs a very strong stimulation. Babinski is the 90 millisecond. It doesn't take much time. It's delayed. So unusually strong stimulation is needed, and you have to wait. You have to see if the patient does it. Then flex and relax slowly. It will flex the plantar, normal plantar reflex. See what will happen. The toe will flex and then relax. But in Babinski, the toes will extend. The toes will extend. Then some might get confused about spinal shock and neurogenic shock. Here we have included a chart. So just remember, spinal shock, it's a temporary phenomenon. It's a temporary phenomenon. And here we might not have hemodynamic instability. Okay. Characteristic thing about spinal shock is loss of reflexes. Loss of reflexes. How? According to the serial, I gave you delayed plantar response, then from up, bulbocavernosus, then patella, then ankle, then plantar. Okay, then plantar. Again, when it comes back in the same serial. Okay. Then other things, how many days it lasts, not important at all. Just remember. And neurogenic shock, actually main thing about is it's hemodynamic and it's classic triad. Classic triad: hypotension, bradycardia, hypothermia. Okay, we need inotrope support. We know it, so don't worry about it. Just say it at a glance, not a problem. At a glance, so you don't get confused about at a glance. So don't get confused about spinal shock and neurogenic shock. Spinal shock is characterized by loss of reflexes. Loss of reflexes. Okay, guys. Thank you.